is Femi Kuti, and you are listening to NYC Radio Live.
Hello, folks. How are you feeling? Good, I hope. This is David Ellenbogen at NYC Radio Live. Are you excited? No? Yes? Well, I am. We have an amazing ascension happening with the bands that we present here at NYC Radio Live and at KCR. Brooklyn Raga Massive has been offered a 3-month residency at the premier art space in Brooklyn. It's a sprawling venue that fits, 1,000 people, and it has all this really amazing art, outdoor space with hills and trees and food trucks and recording studios. And every Wednesday we'll be putting on really ambitious concerts. And the first one will be the Afrika India collaboration, kind of a retrospective of the year of African Indian concerts that we've been putting on, that if you've been listening for a while, you've heard quite a bit of. The group Africa Meets India will be there, and Awa Sangho, the golden voice of Mali, will be playing with the Brooklyn Raga Massive All-Stars. I'm going to sneak in on that, along with Arun Ramamurthy on violin, and Jay Gandhi and Josh Geisler on bansuri, and Michael Kim on bass, Danielle Moreno on percussion. That's going to be really outrageous. So, lots of good things underway. And the band that we are going to be featuring today, Orakel, had their debut concert just a few weeks ago at Shapeshifter Lab, and we felt that they just killed it and deserved to be on that big opening night concert. So this is really cool. Kane Mathis and Roshni Samlal. It's a Kora, tabla, and electronics duo. And I think, I don't know. This is a band that we'll all be hearing more of. You can't deny this stuff. So I brought them into KCR and was asking Kane just to give a little description of the Kora itself. So anyway, hope to see you this February 3rd, Wednesday, for the opening of the Afrika India concert. And check out the websites, Brooklyn Raga Massive, for a bunch of other ones that you might be excited about. All right, here's Kane telling us the background of his instrument, the Kora.
It's a 21-string West African harp that is one of the most iconic instruments of the Western Mandinka, who had the height of their empire in about the 12th century under the King Sunjata. And the tradition of musical patronage in that empire created what has become one of West Africa's most well-known, widespread, and recognizable bardic traditions. Beyond that aspect, the Kora has become a really virtuosic instrument in the last 50 years, and is one of the sub-Saharan African instruments capable of holding down a great amount of counterpoint just on a single instrument. And the instrument is about 700 years old. But I think the fluidity in the counterpoint that the Kora has, and the ability for the tabla's improvisation within rhythmic cycles to move really quickly and creatively within a structure, makes the two a kind of a great match. Because both of them have very filled out rhythms that can dart and punctuate phrase material in a way that's very spry and supple, kind of like how a jazz drummer would interact with a soloist or something. Like, there's just a lot of freedom in both traditions, but there's also a lot of structure in both traditions. Also, both traditions base their music on rhythmic cycles.
Right, and I guess that brings us into our first selection. You have a composition in Rupak Tal.
7 beats.
Yep.
And it was a pretty good match to go from the 7-beat cycle and the 7-beat melodic cycle as well, with a lot of different breaks in between, using traditional Rupak Tal material, tihais, and also different types of refrains that Kora is often associated with.
Cool. All right. Well, let's do some listening. And just to paint the picture, this is recorded, I guess, 2 weeks ago.
December 16th.
Yeah, at Brooklyn Raga Massive's residency at Shapeshifter Lab, and it's that part of our monthly Africa India series, produced by Brooklyn Raga Massive and Kevin Nathaniel of, what's he call his organization? Afro Roots Music Night, and NYC Radio Live, which is this show and the associated podcast. And there were some people in attendance who won tickets from calling in. And we'll be giving out some tickets in just a little bit. So let's jump into this track from Orakel's debut concert at Shapeshifter Lab. All right, live music here at WKCR 89.9 FM New York. That was the music of Orakel, our very special guests, Roshni Samlal on tabla and Kane Mathis on Kora. That was their debut concert at Brooklyn Raga Massive's residency at Shapeshifter Lab. Really beautiful. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what are your efforts. I know we've had conversations just hanging out of fusion projects in the past and why sometimes they fall short and what has to happen in order for them to reach the full potential.
Well, I definitely think that there has to be rigor and there has to be an exchange of material, more than just grooving and doing what feels like staying within the tradition and just kind of juxtaposing them together. There has to be more interlocking, more exchange of the material, shared principles, like working with different principles of how the music is generated.
Right.
So we definitely started from whatever commonality we had with the cycles or the way that the exposition of the music. So yeah, finding the shared principles and working out of that, I think, is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely well put, and I think that a lot of fusion projects, they don't have. I think at the production stage, there's just not a lot of time. Sometimes these guys are on tour and maybe a producer is able to grab them and they're in the studio for a day, which in a way has worked, and in a way I think there's room for improvement because, like Roshni was saying, there's to make a real collaboration in between two traditions, you have to kind of meet in the middle and you have to explore. Each tradition has to explore the other's tradition conceptually, and sometimes there hasn't been as much of that in the early fusion efforts, I think, and it's been kind of flown under the radar, I think, because a lot of traditions, certainly the West African Mandinka tradition has a big vocabulary of improvisation built into it. Forms are often improvised. I think also in Indian classical music, there's an element of that too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of jam friendly. They're jam friendly traditions. And yet at the same time, I think there's a time now where we as musicians and listeners really want to hear the two traditions get inside each other's heads a little bit. And I think for example, this last piece you heard, the way that we did that is we used melodic phrase philosophies that could be sung a part of a Mandinka song, but yet we used a rhythmic cycle that was from Indian classical music, which there's very few tunes on the Kora that are in 7. So this is kind of a new aspect, and I think in every tune that we do, we try to explore both traditions so that you can point to something and say, this is Kora, and this is tabla. And the best fusions that I've heard are truly fusions, and there's an exchange of material between, like you were saying, between the two artists or groups, and you can learn something classically about both traditions. And I think this is kind of where we're headed now, is where I can show up with a Kora in a tradition or culture that I don't necessarily know, take some time to come out of my comfort zone and come out of my kind of choreographed responses that I might have, and yet be steeped enough in the tradition to respond with traditional vocabulary. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like, to summarize kind of what you're saying, like those early fusion efforts, say Ravi Shankar, Yehuda Menuhin, like they just didn't have the time. They weren't like, Yehuda Menuhin wasn't really studying Indian raga. Like he didn't go for 4 months to India and get inside of it, and probably the converse. And then also you guys, you're putting in a lot of time and really honoring both traditions, and also that humility factor that you're talking about has to really come from both sides. Otherwise you get one guy playing jazz and another guy playing rock yamen on top of it or something.
Exactly. And there's been previously we've had this phenomenon where a producer will say, oh man, if I could only get these two guys to play together. And they do play together, but what you wind up with is a product that doesn't go beyond the encounter, the novelty of the encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Well, I definitely think that in the past, figures like Ravi Shankar or Philip Glass or Jerry Riley or any number of the innovators who have brought the tradition with the innovative aspect of really creating new compositions. They have been successful and they have created new sounds, but then within the continuation of that kind of compositional thinking, maybe a lot of music references that sound that's already been created and already is a part of the collective psyche. So to keep finding new ways of doing that and to keep creating new conversations or new angles of thought, that's really important, because it can be a token meeting point, a really comfortable place to explore, say, African sounds and Indian ethnic sounds too. So to kind of go beyond that and to find what essences are there that can gonna be stretched further.
Right. All right. So set up this next track for us. This is maybe tentatively titled A minor. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, we actually don't even. We don't even have a name for it.
We're still running through the concepts.
This tune, we started out. This was a real combination because we had a tabla that was in A, so we decided to go to A minor, which is in a tuning on the Kora called Sauta, which comes from the Tilibo region, which is the eastern region, Guinea, Mali. And then does this tal come from a traditional tal, the first one that we started out in?
Is it the fours?
Yeah,
basically.
That one.
Yeah, that's a version of Kaherwa tal, which is maybe usually associated with Ghazal style. It's slow, it's a little more meandering and open. But even within these pieces, the tals change. And in this one, it breaks down into Kaherwa, like a faster Kaherwa, or builds up into a faster Kaherwa, and then goes into actually this one goes into Dajatal, which is threes.
Mm-hmm.
And then even a really quick Iktal, which is 12s. So.
And then it ends in the really slow one.
Yeah. So this has an interesting arc to it, for sure.
And then I think, if I remember correctly, when we went from the slow one at first, then we kind of started to speed it up a little bit. And I was saying, this tempo could sound a bit like how this modern Kora style called Yayengo, or in Senegal they call it Mbalak. It's Sabar-driven, Sabar drum-driven rhythms. So I'm playing a Kora style that is like that. And then there was also a tabla rhythm that you came up with that also kind of sounded like Sabar material, but was familiar to you also. And we're like, then let's check that out.
Yeah,
for
that
sure.
was a real learning experience for me to kind of inhabit the way that the cycle moves, because it's different. The accents are different from, say, tabla, which is always on the one, on the one, on the one,
right,
as opposed to the the swingy in and out rhythms of some African drumming. So yeah, finding mimicking patterns or new patterns, that was a learning experience.
Yeah, so this one, we started out with the classical tals, but then we also had some kind of Senegambian Kora stuff in there, and there was a progression of rhythms that also I think are somewhat idiomatic for tabla in a way. Yeah,
just the more folk-driven Kaherwa tal stuff. It's always fun to be able to break into that.
Awesome. All right, I'm looking forward to this. Here's the untitled track from the new group Orakel. Orakel playing for an enthusiastic crowd at Brooklyn Raga Massive's residency at Shapeshifter Lab. I am joined by the members of Orakel, Roshni Samlal and Kane Mathis. So glad you guys could come.
Thanks again for having us.
So much.
Yeah. Wow. So, some exciting things coming up. The residency that you guys have been listening to is moving to what I think is one of the greatest venues in New York City, and that's Pioneer Works in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's going to be 3 months, and guess who we've decided should open the whole thing? Yes. Orakel will be opening up with a retrospective of the year of Afrika India concerts that we've been producing. Our Sangho will be on the bill, as well as a host of other greats. It's going to be very exciting. That's February 3rd at 8 p.m. Red Hook, Brooklyn, Pioneer Works. And Kane, you have a little residency at Barbès.
Yes, I have a residency at Barbès, which is every Saturday in February from 6 p.m. to 7:30. That's the residency spot. And it's going to be amazing. Every Saturday I have a different ensemble. The first one is going to be me with Rich Stein and Max ZT. I'm going to have my trio, which is going to feature Moto Fukushima on bass, and actually I'm replacing drum set with two percussionists, Stan Kerfurst and Rich Stein again. Roshni and I are doing our Orakel project on the last Saturday of February. So you can hear us again there in a small venue as well. But we're going to be, the Pioneer Works is going to be a big one because we're going to have some new material. Obviously, it's going to be in a huge, wonderful venue, and there's going to be a lot of excitement around the BRM opening, and we'll have the collaboration aspect, of course, too. Yeah.
Wow, it's going to be really exciting. And I love Barbès. That's like one of my favorite places to go hear music.
Me too. I'm really honored to be. Their curatorial mission is very interesting, and I'm just really honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, how'd that come together?
Because, well, that was like the first place I played when I first started coming to New York, which was about 7 or 8 years ago. I was on a tour with a band called Spectratone International and stayed to do some shows and got a gig at Barbès and just fell in love with what they were doing, which is kind of what we're talking about, which is traditional music that has some kind of unique approach to it. Like Chicha Libre has been there, and they have, it's cumbia, but it's electric cumbia, and they have a lot of bands that play maybe salsa or rumba, but they mix it with klezmer music and Balkan music, and it's Balkan music, but it's also kind of a rock band or something like that,
Right.
And that's also where we put on the first annual Oud Summit, a summit of American or North American oud players, and that was really successful. And so then just from having shows there over and over with different bands and also with my own bands, I spoke with Olivier, and he offered me the residency spot for February.
Great. Yeah, you gotta love Brooklyn just for having the human capacity to put together an oud festival and then having the audience. That's
and have
pretty
it be well attended.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Wow. Okay. I'm excited to hear more of this music. So this is a piece called...
Well, it's currently called Sending Pictures.
Okay. And
kind of came together that way because it's... Let's see where to start with this one. It contains field recordings from Europe and, different art galleries, footsteps, and source material from those field recordings. Also, it explores just using a lot of different electric tones and different types of, what would you say?
Yeah, it's like, from our point of view, beyond combining the traditions, I think we're both interested in experimental music too. Yeah. And as part of this project, we've been reading up about the history of electronic music a bit and trying to see if we can combine our two traditions with yet a third tradition that we're both interested in. And in that world, you've been listening to or have been checking out
Listening to a lot of women who have pioneered electronic music, Delia Derbyshire and Pod, and just learning about drones and just the different capacities for creating, as Kane does, synthesis.
So who was? I mean, I don't know much about the history of electronic music. Who's like the grandmother, grandfather of electronic music? Like who just like? Where did it start?
Well, we were really interested in musique concrète, which has to do with, music that's been created out of a source that's kind of undiscernible or indiscernible from what you hear. So that's where a lot of the, the processing comes in, where you take some raw material, footsteps or a coin toss or something like that, and then you process it and create any kind of elastic sound out of that, which Kane is actually extremely good at. So.
And that was kind of mostly, well, it was most notably like a French phenomenon, I think around like the mid last century or so, but we've also been checking out like BBC Radiophonic Lab people, Daphne Oran, Delia Derbyshire, and as we mentioned, Pod. So that also takes us into, the purely electronic aspect, which was alongside the musique concrète, kind of happening a little bit more in Germany. And like we've both been reading about Stockhausen lately, and yet at the same time we wanted to create, experiment with these tones, but then also create something that's still groovy and based in what is our frontline technique, which is exploring rhythm, I guess. So the beat for this, as Roshni was saying, the sound design was created from field recordings, and like there's stereo field recordings of the MoMA lobby, there's footsteps from Dia Beacon, there's
atmospheric,
there's a washing machine from London in there
somewhere. Washing machines can
Yeah.
sound amazing. Dryers too.
Yeah, it was the dryer, in fact. And some of them are processed to the point where you can't tell what the source material was. In other cases, you can. And then the drum programming was made with completely analog synthesis. So it wasn't made with a computer, it was made with a drum machine. And yeah, we just wanted to see how they went together, and it was a real good learning process to see what the fun and also what the challenges were of combining electronic fixed media with acoustic instruments are, and especially with regards to combining it with these traditions. So this is a tune called Sending Pictures that we created.
All right, let's go. That was the track Sending Pictures, recorded live at Shapeshifter Lab at Brooklyn Raga Massive's residency, featuring today's guest, Orakel, Roshni Samlal, and Kane Mathis on tabla and Kora, respectively. Wow, really beautiful. I had a friend who would always encourage me to go to concerts at various kind of avant-garde places. And a lot of times it was just one person with a laptop. And I never felt satisfied. I always felt like something was missing. And I'd talk to other people in the audience and they'd be like, oh my God, he has such incredible energy. And I just I couldn't get it. I couldn't understand. And then, I made a lot of my living being a DJ, which made me not respect DJs really. Because it was took so little ability, compared to, say, learning, an instrument. But somehow, with what you guys were doing, it didn't have that effect. It was, for one, you also had your Kora going through a whole bunch of effects and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of the magic trick, you don't know what's coming from where.
What's happening.
But what do you think is the key to making music that has pre-programmed elements still feel like it has the spontaneous magic of more organic music without that element?
Well, so when we do the show, we have... obviously, I can't create the electronics live on the fly. It is fixed media, but we have it set up so that it can be arranged on the fly, and we have arrangements worked out. But if a solo section goes long, or if we're really feeling it, we can draw out a solo section just like we would if we had a live band. So the arrangement is being triggered live with a foot controller, so I can keep my hands on my instrument. There's also other little things too, there's elements that I can bring in that kind of intensify the texture, the density of the rhythm. I can drop out the basses. I made a switch that does that, and all of those are things that are kind of standard practice, I think, for people who do really live electronics. But we also, and I put my Kora through, I had a delay pedal that I used for some of the transitions, but not a ton of effects really. But also the laptop wasn't really featured very prominently on the stage visually. I never, or seldom.
You made a point of not having that happen.
Right. I really didn't want to address the laptop very much because I wanted to keep it about the interaction between the instruments and the musicians. And also I feel that now that laptop DJing has become such a thing and the tools have become so powerful, now we are seeing what the problem with it is. And the problem with it is, the way I see it, is that traditional DJing with vinyl, you could see the kinesthetic relationship the performer had with their medium. You could see them cueing tracks. You could see them switching when there was scratching involved. Then it's watching someone play an instrument. But watching someone, dial a rotary encoder to choose a track is maybe not the most interesting thing. But when you see somebody playing a taiko drum, you have what's called in theater a sympathetic kinesthetic response. When you see someone jumping around on stage, that feels exciting to watch because you have that sympathetic kinesthetic response. And when you're watching people play sitar and moving up and down the neck, or playing tabla, and there's a 1-to-1 ratio between movement and sound, we get that. We don't get somebody mousing around on a trackpad or turning an encoder per se. That doesn't create the same sympathetic kinesthetic response. And so we wanted to make the way that the Orakel project presents be very much about the instruments.
Yeah. And then, there's always that element of the space and how the sound will fill the space in relation to the instruments, and how forward the sound of the instruments will be in relation to the electronic material. And just finding that compatibility was always a process, and always a return to, is that palette working? Is this palette working? With the bass, would the bass cancel out the tabla bass, which is so sensitive? So it's kind of very easy for tabla to get lost with a lot of other rhythmic elements.
Sure.
So as we composed and chose sounds that would form the basis for the live instrumentation, it was always interesting. And then we never knew, like, hearing things out of speakers was a new experience for me to, like, place my tabla in the context of that kind of electronic sound. So, something out of a house speaker versus like a rehearsal space speaker, or a place like Shapeshifter, which has such a great sound system. It kind of, there's so many variables that you have to work with. So that was very new for me.
That's a really great point about the balance, because sometimes a DJ will have really great percussionists play along with them, but the fact that the pre-recorded stuff is so much more powerful in the mix, you don't really get the essence of what that person is capable of. It's kind of like they're just tagging along or something. And
there's moments where the electronics do shine through, like actually at the end of, I think, this next piece, there's a drone composition that just has its own moment, and the electronics have their moment. And actually, we don't play it all during that moment. And that kind of shows, a certain line of inquiry that we have. But I think at the end of the day, we want the Orakel project to be about seeing people play instruments, and we want it to be like, if I bought a ticket for our show, I would want to see tabla and Kora playing almost primarily. And there are special pieces, and there's parts of pieces where the electronics come very forward, but the overall impression of the show, I think, is about the instruments.
Definitely. And in this last piece, or the upcoming piece, the electronic media is used like a lehera. So instead of having, in a tabla solo, having the lehera or the melodic cycle that keeps, like, whatever, time cycle you're using, whether it's 7, in this case it's 7, we tried to create a cycle out of the mostly drum beats, basically, and, have the movement of the tal be mimicked by the rhythm of the drum machine, the analog drums that you used, but also, like, where would the accents be? How would the lilt and the movement of the tal be felt through it without canceling what I was playing over it? So again, balance was really, really important. And it was, the cycle is very complexified. Like, there are a lot of micro beats happening, and then, like, undercurrents happening. And so we wanted to keep that element interesting and not just have it just be, like, metronomic. So finding interesting ways to explore that wouldn't conflict with the tabla movement, because it's so fine. There's so many fine movements and sounds. Was definitely a challenge and a learning experience.
And we found that, even though it's an experimental process, we are still beholden to traditional approaches to things like orchestration.
Yeah.
Like, we've carved out all kinds of sonic space in these pieces after we rented a rehearsal space and tried to do the live show, and realized, we actually have to take a lot of bass out of major sections of the piece, or else, especially in the tabla solo, there's voices that you're not going to hear, and there's articulations that are going to get buried. So that was a really good learning process too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited to hear this. So this is called...
This is the electro-rupak.
This is just called electro-rupak.
It's a rupak tabla solo.
All right. Let's check it out. Whoa, man.
Deep.
Yeah, it got me rethinking everything my whole life. I'm
That's
like, what am I?
drones do. They're deep.
Yeah. Wow. So you guys are covering a lot of territory for two people.
Trying
A
to.
lot of musical history.
A lot of disparate influences for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got Stockhausen and Indo-G and the Mandinka tradition, amongst others.
True.
Yeah,
To do.
what to do. I don't know. I think I'm telling everybody, I feel like this band is like ready to go. I think it's
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, I guess because of the so many different influences, so many different people can get reached. You know, there's some people who only have time for music with some electronic elements,
Mhm.
you know, and that'll reach them. And there's some people who want to tap their toes a little bit more than they might at a standard, you know, Drupad something or you know, classical performance, you know. So
Mhm.
That's the beauty of
So-
Raga Massive too, is that it brings together so many divergent communities and creates a platform for everything to meet in a really smart way. And it's very encouraging to be a part of that community.
yeah, and actually, that's a good segue. After this mic break, I'll be giving away a pair of tickets to. Have you heard any indie rag?
Indie
Indie
Rag,
Rag.
you say?
I haven't, but I will.
I can guess. I can guess some of the elements of that.
Yeah, there'll be an indie rock concert, the Neil Murgai Family Band. That'll be this Wednesday at Shapeshifter Lab on 18 Whitwell Place. Doors at 8 p.m. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets to that. And our friends at the Reuben Museum are putting on the great Pakistani sitar player Ikhlaq Hussain, January 21st at 7 p.m. So I'll be giving away a pair of tickets to that as well. And we have one last tune. Any important things we didn't touch on before we play your? No, very thorough interview.
Yes, it's true. Do you want to talk about some of the elements? Or?
Let's see, this one, you know, we were saying that a lot of the music kind of has threes aspect, like threes and fours, and moves kind of smoothly through both of those
Rhythmic
cycles.
Yeah.
So it's very, like, a lot of the thinking that happens is very mathematical, and then that gets overlaid with a melody. You know, so there's a lot of that aspect to it.
Okay.
A lot of Senegambian Kora playing style in this. It starts out with kind of more of a Mali Guinean, more promenading type of kumbengo or Kora pattern that would be used to accompany some maybe like more epic singing. And then it goes into a faster Senegambian Kora pattern. And then at the end it actually uses some repurposed breaks from some traditional tunes even, like Serifusidi. We have some reductions that are...
Yeah, so this one it starts out in Dajatal, which is 6, and moves into Teental. And how it does that is through different tihais and, some Korvai or South Indian type mathematical reductions.
What do you mean by that?
Right, what do I mean by that? Well, in
Rhythmic
Hindustani
reduction.
classical music, we have a lot of tihais, you know, phrases that repeat in threes with or without gaps. And in a lot of Carnatic music, you'll find rhythmic compositions that are more phrase-based and less about the threes, more interesting movements from different subdivisions, you know, subdivisions of threes or fives. And another trope is to have the phrases shorten predictably. And this one shortens from a 5 to a 4 to a 3 to a 2.
Okay.
The 2 creates a T-high, and then that whole thing repeats 3 times. And then there's a pause, and then we get into Teental, which goes, it starts in Madhya lay, which is medium speed, and then it breaks with another corvée type subdivision composition into Drut lay, which is the fast cycle, which is very typical for Indian classical. So we kind of wanted to bring in more of the Indian classical the usual trajectory of an Indian classical piece, which is to start slow and go super fast, as fast as you can, basically.
Okay.
And then the interesting end to this one is, of course, you always end with a grand finale Tihai, and that's kind of another token moment in an Indian classical piece.
Yeah.
And we kind of didn't want to use the usual Tihai, so Kane came up with a really, really fun Tihai-like composition to end with.
Yeah, like it starts, the Tihai is kind of almost has like phrasing that comes from the dun-dun drum, and it has a really kind of syncopated beginning, you know, because we were going before, it was like the setup to the Tihai was
The crescendo.
So, but we changed it. We were like, and then we were like, bam, 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 which is like kind of, I don't know, some a little bit dun-dun. Also, maybe you could see it as sabar, but then we shortened it to make it an ending Tihai. So, yeah.
Right. And the dun-dun is the Nigerian talking drum.
Well, the dun-dun, I mean, there's so many log drums or barrel drums, I guess you would say, but the dun-dun is the Mandinka, largest Mandinka bass drum that supports typically djembes.
Okay.
It can also, it's very foundational to the rhythmic accent schemes of Mandinka music. When you hear even any bass information that happens in Mandinka music, you can oftentimes trace back to dun-dun. Like if you listen to the post-colonial electric bands, even if you listen to the kick and bass accent schemes, very dun-dun-like. So, and those are the Mandinka
Gotcha.
drums, yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, let's, and this is another yet to be titled.
Everything is so new. We're gonna have a SoundCloud page up, and you can come to our artist page or find us on Facebook, and within probably 48 hours there will be a link to a SoundCloud and a Facebook fan page for the project. So
Stay tuned.
stay
Yeah.
tuned.
All right. Here we go.